Good evening, everyone. This is Aniruddha Fadke, Vice President of the Political Science Association, Wilson College, Mumbai. This session is taking place in collaboration with the Nature Club of Wilson College. In this session, celebrating environment, we will see what we need to do to save big animals and endangered birds. How, how did the Amur falcon get conserved in Nagaland? How can we live with wildlife and yet develop our nation? What does the bird outside our window have to do with the environment impact assessment? In this session, Neha Sinha ma'am will discuss her field projects, her work with laws and policy, giving invaluable advice on how to conserve the natural world. Neha Sinha is a conservation biologist, author, and columnist. She has won the 2017 Wildlife Service Award. Her book, Wild and Wilful, opened to rave reviews and is available at Harper Collins India. She works for the Bombay Natural History Society, heading conservation and policy. Ma'am, it is indeed an honor to have you to speak to our participants and sensitize them about the need to save our environment. You are an inspiration to us with all the amazing work you have done.
Thank you so much for having me. And I have been a student of political science as myself in high school. So it's very interesting for me to talk to a group of people who are going to be political scientists one day. I believe that political science and politics, along with environment, are something that's very enmeshed together. I believe that environment is not it's not something that is divorced from politics. And this is the reason why I immediately said yes to speaking, because we kind of tend to look at environment as something that's very away from politics, and we look at politics that's very away from environment. We like to enjoy pictures of, say, a tiger or a beautiful bird or a beautiful animal, and we think it's very away from the political climate. But today's talk, I'm going to actually be showing you how politics and environment go together and how they often clash as well, and why, in order to develop our nation, we need to consider both the environment and politics. So, as I said, I want to problematize the idea that conservation and environment are separate from each other. And, when we don't want to conserve the environment, we kind of look at beautiful pictures of tigers and leopards and elephants, and we say it's something that lives in the jungle far away from us. And the days that we feel like, conserving environment, we talk a little bit about how, we can have better policies for them. But actually, I want to suggest that environment is a system that is kind of going at its own pace every single day of the year. And, whether we intend to protect it or whether we don't intend to protect it, it is a system that's working. And in order to progress and in order to develop our nation and to develop a habitable country to live in, or, one that we would want to live in and one that we want to leave for our kids, it's important to consider the system that is the environment and the various ecosystems. So I'm going to start with one of my favorite jungle photos. I'm not going to tell you what this is. Can anybody tell me what we're looking at? Look carefully at this picture. Any guesses? I'll give you a hint. You have to look in the center. Okay. What we are looking at is a perfectly camouflaged Indian leopard. So if you look right at the center, do you see this? You can unmute yourself when I'm asking a question. This thing,
Yes,
this is a leopard. And as you can see, they're really hard to see. And they have spots on their body because they actually have to live amongst these kind of grasses and rocks. So it's a jungle animal. It's an animal that lives in, this is the kind of jungle it prefers. It's a dry forest animal, mostly speaking. And you see these big rocks over here. And I do want to take a couple of minutes to tell you about this animal and the kind of habitat it lives in, because it's important for the next part of the presentation. So we see these tall trees, we see this long grass, we see these shrubs and saplings. These are the saplings of the sal, and these big rocks. And in the daytime, the leopard will typically sit on these rocks and sun itself. There is a tree growing out of this rock, which is a particular kind of tree that grows only on rocks and on extremely hard surfaces, while these are teak trees which will grow, in normal soil. Now, the leopard is living in this kind of area, which is a forest. But being students of Bombay, you would also know that the leopard is also found in Bombay, in not far from where you are, in Sanjay Gandhi National Park. So what is really happening over here? This is an animal that's adapted to live in the forest. It's an animal that's a predator. It actually eats meat to survive. How does it get meat? It gets meat by hunting. And in order to live, therefore, this animal has to be around other prey animals that it will hunt, like deer, or like wild pig, or even porcupines. And in order to live, this animal has two requirements. One is that of land, and I'm going to come to that in a bit. And obviously the second is that of food. It requires land, which is forest land or wilderness areas, and it requires food, which is the animals I just described. So there is one act in India which considers the needs of wild animals, and that is the Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. So obviously this act has been in force for many years. It's a very old and well known, and this is my favorite act amongst all the acts. I think the Constitution of India is a wonderful document, but if I were to think of which is the law that is my favorite, it's definitely the Wildlife Protection Act, because it gives a name and a face to animals like leopards, which are big, dangerous. They have specific needs which we may not always like. So we don't like the idea, for example, always that an animal with such big teeth is kind of living near us, or living somewhere close to our houses, or it's coming near our livestock. And the Wildlife Protection Act seeks to conserve and provide for the protection of wild animals, birds, and plants. And as I said, a wild animal, bird, or plant requires land, it requires space to live in, and it requires things to eat, or ways to survive. And this doesn't always fit in with the plans that we make. I want to just quickly go through what are the important laws of India to do with wildlife conservation. Are you able to see my face, or do I need to pin it to the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Now the participants will need to pin the screen. So participants, you can just select the screen and pin it on your end.
Okay, and you're able to see me while I'm presenting?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so these are the acts of India which are important for nature conservation, which are to do with environment. The first, of course, is the Wildlife Protection Act. It's the oldest one. It says essentially that wild animals need to be protected in India. Most wild animals have protection against hunting, except for a few animals that are classified as vermin, or animals that can cause disease, or they can cause some loss to people's lives. The other is the Forest Conservation Act that seeks to conserve forests, and the third is the Environment Protection Act, which is a very overarching act to do with many aspects of life outside of wildlife and forests. So it would have things to do with some of the areas that need to be protected that are outside forest land, for example. Then we have the Water and Air Acts, which basically are for prevention of pollution of water and air. These are the big ones. And as I go forward, I want to go back to my leopard. So this is a better picture, much better than the one that I showed you earlier, of a leopard in North Bengal. And to be more specific, this is an animal that has been camera trapped. A camera trap is a device which has a heat sensor, and it's put in places, it's hidden in places, and it takes an image when something moves in front of it. So it's a nice non-invasive way of actually tracking animal movement, because the reason I've chosen the leopard is to show you the difficulties and the challenges that come with really, thinking of conserving animals, like which are nocturnal. So this is a nocturnal animal. This picture has been taken at night. It's actually a female leopard. Her name is Martina, and she is in a tea estate in West Bengal. Right, so this is not this landscape. This is not a forest. And this picture I had taken in actually what is known as a tiger reserve. This is Pench Tiger Reserve in Madhya Pradesh. There's also Pench Tiger Reserve in Maharashtra, in where Wilson College is. But this is an area that is protected under the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, because it is actually a tiger reserve. But this animal has been photographed in a place which does not have any protection. The land itself does not have protection. The animal has protection because it is named in the Wildlife Conservation Act. And here is one of the biggest contradictions of having to conserve wildlife. So you have an animal that is endangered. Leopards are poached for their skin. See this beautiful skin, and let's take a moment to admire this amazing animal. So it has this long tail, and I am a student of conservation biology, and it always started with the way animals are engineered. It's so amazing the way they've evolved to kind of survive very difficult and demanding lives. So just a moment to appreciate this long tail which curves up. And this is a tail that balances the animal as it jumps and it runs and it climbs. And typically when it catches prey, it takes them up a tree in order to make sure that nobody else gets the prey. So because a tiger is a sort of a rival to a leopard, so are dholes, so are jackals, so are wolves. And it has these. It does not have spots. It has what is known as rosette. So as you can see, this is not a spot actually. This is a pattern. It's like a circle that's not closed. It kind of looks like a rose, which is why it's called a rosette. It has really good eyesight. That's the way you're able to, this picture has been taken at night because it's actually hunting at night. It hunts at twilight most often. It has these really strong, powerful whiskers, which help it to sense things that are happening around it. They're almost like antennae that help the animal to detect what's going on. It has these really powerful paws, which have claws, which help the animal to hunt and to climb. Now this is an animal that only eats meat. In biology, we call it obligate carnivore, meaning it is obligatory for the animal to eat meat. This is an animal that's not in a reserve forest or in a tiger reserve. What is going to happen to this animal? The land does not belong to the forest department. The land does not belong to anything to do with conservation, but the species is protected. This is the key to several livelihood contradictions and the key to many dilemmas that we face as wildlife conservationists. And I want to, complete that story arc by showing you this beautiful elephant, and that is her calf. So this elephant is Ganga, and she also was in the same landscape as the leopard, which is the tea gardens of North Bengal. Now, when we think of tea or coffee that we drink, we may not consider where it comes from, but we do know that tea and coffee are major crops for India, right? So tea is grown in West Bengal, it's grown in Assam, coffee is grown in Tamil Nadu, in the Coorg, Nilgiri area. And these are places that used to be forest, and now those places are tea and coffee estates. So this place is a typical tea estate in which these are the tea bushes and there are these trees growing. If you see carefully, it's a group of men standing over here because the entire herd of elephants is inside the tea estate, again in Terai, in North Bengal. And to understand the biology of the animal is also important. So elephants have these matriarchal herds in which there's a female that leads the herd, and it's a herd of females, and they have their young ones. So you'll have a young calf like this one. You'll have calves that are slightly older, so it's like a creche almost. So only females and the young ones. The males are not part of the herd, and they move together to find food. And an elephant needs 100 kilos of food every day, at the very least, an adult elephant. So, one of the reasons why elephants move so much is because they actually need to eat that much. So they eat, they will browse, they will also graze, meaning they will eat leaves, they will eat grass, but they also need more substantive food. They need fruit, they need various many kinds of things that one area will not give, which is why they have to keep moving. So now this elephant herd is inside this tea estate. The tea estate belongs to somebody who's there to grow tea. And, here are people standing and wondering what to do. Sometimes you get political lobbies made of people who simply don't want any animals on their land because it's a livelihood issue for them. Sometimes the more problematic aspect is when you have any other kind of political need for that land, when that land is part of some other vision, and we'll come to that, which does not factor in the systems that are running beyond us, which is the ecosystems. As I started off by saying, there are systems that run in the world that we don't know of, or that are running regardless of what we're doing, which are ecosystems of nature. And elephant migration is one such system. And, wild animals live all around us, even if we don't know it, or even if we don't care to acknowledge it. So this kind of situation is very interesting because it's a central challenge for Indian conservation. There's always a livelihood issue where there is a large mammal. So you have species, which is your tiger or your leopard or your elephant. So you'll have tigers coming to capital cities. There was a tiger in Bhopal. There was a tiger in Lucknow. There was a tiger, there was a tiger in Kolkata, but that was a long time ago. There's a question of the species and what it needs. So as I said, the leopard needs to eat other animals. An elephant needs fresh water, and it needs to find 100 kilos of food every day. Then there's the question of land. The land is owned by somebody who may not have, species as a goal, species conservation as a goal, or the land is kind of an idea for the government for some vision that they may have to change the land. And finally, you have the livelihood issue, because everything is a livelihood issue in our country. We are a poor country, and if there's an elephant coming on a piece of land that is actually a tea estate, then the tea grower doesn't want that to happen because they may think that it's hurting them in some way. Or if a leopard comes to a small farmer and eats the goat or eats the sheep of the farmer, he does not want that. It's a direct impact on his livelihood. This is also one of my favorite sort of principles to go by, and this is the Center of Environmental Law versus Union of India, 2013. It's a very landmark judgment. I'm happy to share this presentation for whoever wants it. This is the public trust doctrine. So we've just discussed how land is so problematic. The question of land, who owns it, the question of land and species, us and the animal is problematic and it's complicated. But the public trust doctrine says that the state is a custodian of natural resources, and it has a duty to take these resources and to conserve them, not just for the public, which is you and me, you students of political science or whatever subject you're studying, and me as a Homo sapiens. It's not just for Homo sapiens, but it's also for the best interest of flora, wildlife, and fauna. And the doctrine of public trust has to be understood in that perspective. So basically, when we go back to the question of species, land, and livelihood, it's a very political question, as I'm constantly saying. What happens to this elephant who is not in a protected area, who is protected by the Wildlife Protection Act of India? The public trust doctrine is saying that we need to conserve our resources in a way that she, Ganga elephant, is also benefited. And Ganga elephant actually died. And that's there in my book. I write about her in great detail because what happens is that farmers chase the elephants off their land. And they chased this particular herd by throwing, firecrackers and burning fire torches and beating drums, etc. So they chased the entire herd of elephants, and the entire herd of elephants rushed out of the paddy fields, and it went onto a railway track where there was a railway line that's operational. A train was coming, and the calf got hit. This calf got hit by the train, and the mother tried to save the calf, and therefore both of them died. And this is something that happens nearly every month in our country, that there are trains which are seen as a wise use of the land, and there are new railway lines being made in areas which have a lot of elephants, and the needs of the elephant are not considered when looking at the land issue. It's only seen through the lens of commerce, and only seen through the issue of how to carry goods and how to move people. I want to point out, I think you guys are at the age when you should be learning about the organizations in our country that are doing great work, and you're learning about, how the country works, really. And I recommend LIFE, which is the Legal Initiative for Forest and Environment. It's a advocacy group which also does a lot of court cases. Their main strength is actually litigation, but they do a lot of advocacy and research. They've come out with this new report. It's just come out this month. It's an analysis of wildlife clearances in India for last year, 2020. And even though we were in a pandemic, it's important to know that a lot of land for wildlife was cleared. So these are diversions within tiger habitats. It's either the tiger reserve or the area just around the tiger reserve. So Mukundra Hill, which is this blue bar, has lost 80 hectares of land. Dampa has lost 104 hectares of land. Dampa is in Arunachal Pradesh, and it represents a very different kind of forest. It's kind of this moist, evergreen tropical forest. And the West Himalayas are very different from East Himalayas. East Himalayas have a lot more moisture and extremely rare and restricted species. It's a biodiversity hotspot, meaning those species are kind of not found anywhere else. And even Corbett has lots of land, but we're not sure of what is the area. And Pake is also in Arunachal Pradesh. And this is a very small snapshot of the way area meant for earmarked under the Forest Conservation Act, which is earmarked for wildlife conservation, gets devastated, destroyed, or diverted for anything other than wildlife conservation. This is a very small snapshot. It kind of happens every month. And we're losing forest land and other, ecosystem land very, very fast. And it's important to take a longer view of this. And so coming back to the idea of, as I said, it is about species, it's about land, it's about livelihood. But another way to look at it is animals, us in the middle, and the real politics, the politics that really surrounds wildlife conservation. And as I said, the central issue is that of land and what should really be done with land. And before I go to the actual, example, I just wanted to, take a minute to show you, how important just a few resources can be for ecosystems and for species. So these are pictures of just 2 trees in Delhi. I study this tree. This is the samal tree. This is silk cotton tree. And every year it flowers at springtime, and I study it to understand what all comes to the tree, what impact it has, the flowering of the tree on the ecosystem around it. And so just to say, and it's important when we understand nature, it's important to get into specificities because each system is different. So this is the first bird, this little green bird is a green beater. It does not have the honey of the big flower. This is the big flower of the samal. It's sitting there because it's eating the bees that come on the flower. This is a laughing dove. This is a collared dove. You must have seen this bird. It's quite common. And it's just sitting here. It's not eating anything. It's using the tree as shelter. Okay, so the first bird is sitting there eating the insects that come on the flower. The second is sitting there because the tree is shelter for the bird. It's some place for it to be safe, sitting safely. These are red-naped ibis. It's a large bird. It's a very old, prehistoric, almost bird. Ibis are found in many parts of the world. This is a common one in India. This is a colony of ibis sitting on a sample tree. So there are juveniles, meaning there are young adults, and in this colony, and they're using this tree as a place where they live in, meaning they roost on this tree. They are there in the night and they're there in the morning before they go hunting, because this is a bird that actually eats snakes and lizards. So it's actually going to get off the tree and go to parks where it's going to hunt for snakes. But it's not eating anything on the tree, but it is using it as a roosting spot. And finally, this is the brown-headed barbet. This is the bird that is going to drink the nectar of the flower. This first picture, it's looking at the nectar. The second picture, its face is inside the flower. So I'm trying to say a single tree has many roles to play, and that single tree is growing on land in a city. Now, it's not expensive to grow a tree, but it's never the question of the tree. It's always the question of the cost of the land. It's never the cost of the tree, but it is a question of the cost of the land the tree grows on. And that's important for us to understand as we move forward. So this is one of the trees that I monitor. It's in Sundar Nursery, which is a protected park. It's not protected for wildlife. It's kind of protected for these old monuments that you see. So this is one sample, this is the second sample. And now the destiny of these two sample trees is a little fine because they're in a place where the monument is being protected. Therefore, it's unlikely anyone will come and cut this tree. But there are more questions of trees that are not growing inside protected areas or areas that are protected for any other reason than wildlife. This is one of my favorite restaurants in Delhi. It's called Jamun. This is a samal growing in front of it. Clearly, it has grown itself. Because if you see the first picture, it's kind of broken the footpath and it's come out. And some would say, people who love trees, people like me would say that you shouldn't have a footpath there. Everything doesn't need to be concrete. The city needs trees. And if, the tree has grown itself, the footpath should be, opened out. A ring should be made around it and the tree should be allowed to grow. But the people who are in the building, the commercial, whatever issues or whatever commercial prospects they have, they don't want the tree there, right? They wouldn't want it because it's, for them, it's growing in a place which it should not grow. And it's like when a leopard comes to a city, we feel that it should not be in that city. What I'm trying to say is that, the tree may be free to grow, but the land it is on is not for free. And we decide, the human race is deciding what to do with the land, which is why you have clearances in the most important tiger reserves in India. We have clearances happening every few months. And so we are basically saying it's okay to divert land that was meant for tigers for any other purpose than tiger conservation. Before I go forward, because you're from Mumbai, I also wanted to show you this amazing picture taken by my friend Shaunak Modi. It's a humpback dolphin. And that's your Bombay skyline in the back, and that's the ocean. And, he does this, he's part of this group that does marine walks. You should definitely look them up. They're called the Marine Life of Mumbai. They have a website. I'm happy to send the links for whoever's interested. And they do walks on the shore of Mumbai, and they discover amazing animals. And, dolphins are animals. They're actually mammals, and they live in the sea. But, Mumbai's waters are so toxic that it's difficult to imagine having dolphins right there. But there are dolphins in Mumbai. There are also dolphins, freshwater dolphins in Kolkata, which is a huge city like Mumbai. So there are animals that are following pathways which we can't see, which will takes me to my next slide, that there are many pathways in water and the air and the land that animals take. And it's nice to be aware of a few of them. So these are the flyways of the world. Flyway is basically a path in the sky. So birds follow particular paths every year, and there are many different flyways, meaning many different places from which birds originate and they go to another place. It's fixed, like they've decided where they want to go. So this one in the middle, this lime green one is the Indian one. It's called the Central Asian Flyway. So all the birds from the north will go to the south in winter. And I want to show you something that my organization, BNHS, has found. So this is a little bit east-west also, but it's essentially, they're trying to escape the winter. Okay, now let's start with Uzbekistan, such a beautiful country. So this bird is the northern shoveler, which is basically a duck. And it has a really broad beak, and it shovels, the area, the wetland area, to find food, which is why it is known as a shoveler. It was tagged, meaning there's a ring that they put on the bird, and they put a color band on the bird. They catch it in a safe way, and they put the color band on the bird. And then, we have a network of ornithologists or citizen scientists who take pictures of migratory birds in the other countries, and they're able to find, the details of the tag by, high resolution images. So this is a non-invasive way to understand how birds are using the land and the sea and the water. Land, when I say land, I mean any area. It could be, water, it could be, sky even. I'm trying to say that we're trying to understand the patterns that birds use. So, okay, in Odisha, in February 2018, this northern shoveler was tagged by the NHS, okay? And it is, last month, it has been sighted in Uzbekistan, which means that it comes from Uzbekistan to Odisha every year to winter as part of the Central Asian Flyway migration. And it goes back, it goes back in when it starts getting hot. So by April of this year, it's already back in Uzbekistan because it's already getting hot for it in Odisha. Now, this is also interesting. In 2017, this bird, the Derrick Sandpiper. Sandpiper is a bird that is not found in water. So the northern shoveler is found inside the water, and it hunts and it searches for food in the water. The Derrick Sandpiper is a bird that is found on the shore. It's got these long legs, as you can see, which are good for wading in the shore, and it has this long beak where it finds insects on the shore. So it was tagged in the Gulf of Kutch, which is an amazing desert in Gujarat, and then it went to Pakistan. It was found in May this year. I also want to show you the curlew sandpiper. This bird, again, it's a wading bird that is not found in the water, but it's found in the shore next to the water. So it was actually right where you are, Navi Mumbai. It was tagged in 2019, and it makes this long journey to another sea. So it's crossing India. It's crossing it's crossing Bhutan, and it's crossing China, the biggest country. And then it's going to the salt pans of Tianjin. So in February, it was in India. In May, many years later, it is found in China. So it's doing this, up and down every year. Small bird, pretty amazing. Then there's also this migration happening between Tamil Nadu and Hong Kong. And finally, it is to be noted that there are some birds that are breeding only in India. This is the Indian skimmer. Amazing bird. It's kind of black and white. It's got this orange beak, and the lower beak is bigger than the upper beak. It uses the lower beak like a spoon almost to skim the water and to hunt for prey. So it goes from Chambal, which is India's cleanest river, to a small place in Bangladesh. Now, why am I showing you this map? A, it's of scientific curiosity, and all of us who are crazy about birds and animals are interested to find out what do they do, how do they live. But the second reason I'm showing you is because, these birds are crossing political boundaries, and they are not just crossing political boundaries, but geographical boundaries as well. So when you see this curlew sandpiper going from Maharashtra to your Navi Mumbai to Tianjin in China, it is crossing, as you can see, it is crossing the Himalayas as well. So it's flying a long flight. It's an arduous flight. It's a flight that has to be difficult because the Himalayas are only the world's highest mountains. And it's crossing geographical barriers, it's crossing political boundaries. And, it must be also facing other threats on the way, like hunting, poaching, electrocution, poisoning. All of that is also a threat that's always there for wild animals. So this is something we need to understand, that the land is not just being used by us. Again, by land, I mean water and sky as well. It's not just for our airspace or not just for our consumption. When we go back to the ideas of the public trust doctrine, to remember that, the use of resources is not just for Homo sapiens. So I'm trying to say there are these systems at work, which we may not be aware of, that are happening alongside our lives. And if we are to think of developing our country, it's nice to, have your roads and your, airports and all of those things that we need. But we also need to plan for the ecological processes that happen in our country. The two cannot be separated from each other. Both are equally important in order to make it a good development plan. Also wanted to show you, this is a steppe eagle. It's a large eagle that migrates every year. So the last study I showed you was actually tagging or ringing. This is a satellite collar that's put on the bird, in which it gives a live signal. It's not done by us, it's done by another organization. But as you can see, okay, so all these colors are different steppe eagle, they're different individuals, and they've been fitted with satellite tags, and they follow these crazy routes, and they come, again over the mountains. So some of them are coming to Gujarat every year. The others are going to other parts. And they're doing this migration each year in order to just survive. So every time it's winter, they will come down to the more towards closer to the equator. Okay. Now moving on to one project that I am involved in personally since the last many years. These are also migratory birds. These are the Amur falcons. And Amur falcons come to Nagaland in Northeast India from Russia and China every year. And they are coming down again to escape this, the cold, the winters. And they have a very different migration. Let me show you. So these are two individual Amur falcons that were tagged against satellite tagging, which gives live signals. So it has come from a fairly cold place, Mongolian area, and it comes down to Doyang Reservoir, which is my field site. And then it crosses the Indian subcontinent. One of these guys went to Mumbai, and it goes to Mumbai every year. And then it goes down to the Horn of Africa and then to South Africa. So this is an amazing migration that crosses not just this area which has mountains, but the Indian subcontinent and the Indian Ocean. So it's crossing so many continents and going right down to South Africa, where it eats termites. It's primarily an insectivorous bird, and it chases dragonflies over the Indian Ocean. And then it goes back when summer comes. So this is a bird that is doing the longest migration for any falcon. It's a 22,000 kilometers every year, which is amazing as far as I can consider it. And so this bird was being hunted in this place, which is the Doyang Reservoir. And Doyang Reservoir was created after a dam was made on the Doyang River in Nagaland. And again, when we do these large-scale changes to land, whether we make dams or whether we cut forests, it changes the way wild animals use the landscape. So why do these falcons come to this reservoir? They come here because they eat insects. And in October, which is the time they come to Nagaland, there are lots of insects over the water. A lot of dragonflies, a lot of termites, because, it's just rained in Northeast. As I said, it's a very moist part of the world, but after the monsoon, there's a flush of insects that come out. And so these falcons gather over the water and they are hunting these insects that fly. So they were not coming in such large numbers to the young reservoir earlier because there was no reservoir. The reservoir was made as a result of a dam, which created this reservoir and which created the congregation of falcons as we know it now. And just to explain a bit more, so this is Nagaland, and the Yang is here. There's a river. It's not very clear in this map. And there are these small villages of Pangti and Sumru. And the people of Pangti and Sumru started hunting these Amur falcons because, it was just an easy thing to do. And there is a lot of cultural acceptance for hunting. As I said, it is, illegal to hunt under the Wildlife Protection Act, but a lot of the times you don't have a perfect consonance between the law of the land and what people actually do. So, in order to address this, we worked, intensively with the Forest Department and the local community. These, on the map, these areas also get a lot of Amur falcons, and we have eco clubs and community outreach in all these areas, which has helped in stopping the hunt of the falcon. So, in this instance, in the instance of, the Amur falcons, it is important to understand, I am looking at it from a perspective of a wildlife conservationist or a conservation biologist who is interested in the ecology of the bird, who's interested in what the bird does, what does it need, why does it come here. But to do wildlife conservation in the real world, the question comes back to that of land, the way land is used, the way people interact with the land. And in order to save this bird, we had to do a lot of work with the community. It's the community that has saved the bird. It's not us. And it's very important to be clear on that aspect. But just to say, it is not enough to say, that this is a bird that's protected and you can't hunt it. It's not enough to say nobody should murder anyone, or it's not enough to say that we shouldn't, steal because it's illegal. Laws exist, but, it's difficult to enforce them. And over here, with the Amur falcon issue also, the land is owned by the community. There are fishing rights over the reservoir I showed you. So who owns the land? How do we want to use the land becomes a central question in the conservation of wildlife. So this in the first slide, this is one of our eco clubs, and these kids are presenting a dance, and we had to do a curriculum which was extremely appropriate. So basically, I sat down with them and made a curriculum with them instead of, me telling them what they should study, because what I study is totally redundant. They have way more interesting and exciting ways to, showcase their ideas. They love dancing. They love singing. So they've done a lot of dancing and singing. And this is one of the posters for the project. And so the eco club and the education aspect is just one part of it. It's also important to kind of understand, where Nagaland is. So, I started off by saying, when we look at land, we need to understand there are so many systems at work. So Nagaland is, in a part of India which borders, it has an international border. And over here, if you see this river, this is all Assam. And, Assam is connected to India through what is known as a chicken neck, meaning people who want to go to the northeast go through Assam. And it's a very small, connection between the northeast and the rest of India. So there isn't a lot of, it's not very easy to reach Nagaland. It's considered remote. And the fact that it's considered remote geopolitically has influenced the way things have developed in the state. And to do conservation or to do anything in Nagaland, one has to consider that there have been political histories of Nagaland which are very different from, say, Maharashtra or Delhi or, Madhya Pradesh. The remoteness of Nagaland, the geographical location in which it has, it's got a lot of mountains. It has got a lot of, it has a lot of difficulties because the it rains a lot. The climatic conditions are very different from the rest of many other states. These are all things to consider, when we look at a place. So when I say a bird is migrating and it's kind of going over physical boundaries, it's going over political boundaries, that's also a way to understand just land itself. When we look at land, it's not just what language people speak. It is also physical boundaries and political boundaries, how climate could be different, and all these geopolitical issues that make a place have a particular set of characteristics that could make it very different. So Nagaland is a state that has a very different political history, and that also influences the outcomes of whatever we do. But the Amur falcon story has been a happy story because the community decided to give up hunting Amur falcons. And since 2013, there hasn't been hunting of Amur falcons. And this is all credit to the community for deciding to do something which they'd never done before. So, the outreach that was done and the sort of conversations that were had between us, has resulted in them deciding to kind of try something new, which is try not hunting an animal. But before I end, this is my book, Wild and Wilful, and it released in February this year. It also has, my experiences with the Amur falcon in it, so you're welcome to go take a look. But before I end, I want to go back to the question of land and how we decide to use land. This is a kind of like a visualization of Great Nicobar Island, which is part of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And over here in Great Nicobar Island, you have a place called Galathea Sanctuary, which was actually made for the leatherback turtle. Now, the leatherback turtle is a huge marine turtle. It's hundreds of kilos. It's the biggest marine turtle on Earth. And it migrates from different parts of the world to India. I'm going to take you back to the Flyway map just to give you a sense of scale. So you have the Flyway map in which basically the entire world is cut into, is mapped for migration routes for birds. But similarly, you have migrations that happen between Australia and India for marine life, between Indonesia and India, obviously between Sri Lanka and India, and also India and Dubai. I'm just giving an example. Then you also have animals that go from India to Africa. So land is not just used by us. The sea is not just used by us. It's also used by animals. And so this leatherback turtle is the biggest turtle on Earth, marine turtle on Earth. It's really huge. And it comes to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, and it particularly comes to Galathea Sanctuary in order to lay its eggs for breeding. And the Galathea Sanctuary on Great Nicobar Island was made to conserve the turtle. Okay, so now I'm just going to tell you why it's coming to Galathea. So this is a quote by two turtle biologists, Murli and Adit, and they're saying that leatherback turtles prefer sloping beaches with offshore waters. So a sloping beach, not all beaches are same, right? So in Mumbai, you have a particular kind of beach that's quite rocky in certain places. And in certain places have beaches that are not rocky, that have just a very different kind of sandy substrate. Then there are beaches which have plateaus of rocks and a very different intertidal zone. But in Galathea Sanctuary on Great Nicobar Island, you have this sloping beach. So now the turtle is coming. It can only climb a particular kind of slope. Okay, it cannot climb a very steep slope. And these turtles used to they used to lay eggs in India on the mainland, but they've stopped because of ports and a lot of other, things that have been made in the Indian mainland. So now they only come to the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in India to lay their eggs, out of which this is the most important site. Okay, so now they're saying the leatherbacks prefer sloping beaches with deep waters. And this is most likely the same reason why Galathea Bay is good for having a port there. So what is happening now is that they have denotified the sanctuary to make a port. And this is going to be a huge, intershipping port, and because of which this sanctuary has been denotified. And there are also going to be other things they want to make on the island. There's going to be a lot of deforestation as well. So I just wanted to say that, questions of what to do with this land, which is the land in our country, often do not take into consideration the needs of animals. And in order to conserve animals, we need to understand why they come to a certain place. So I showed you the elephant in the tea estate. I showed you the leopard in the tea estate. Now I'm showing you a turtle that comes to just one place, because that one place has the correct sloping beach that it needs to lay its eggs. And I'm just going to end with the final slide. My biggest sort of takeaway from this talk that I want to give you is to look and interpret land around you in the way that involves ecology as well as politics. So this was a nice map. I really like it. This was actually made by Nandini Velo and her team. So they're trying to save this place called Molam, which is a wildlife sanctuary and national park in Goa. And there are a number of projects that are coming up over here. So they have a railway line, a road, and transmission lines coming up in this landscape. And these people have mapped for us the entire hydrology of the area, which is the streams and running water of Goa. Now, Goa is part of the Western Ghats, and there's lots of water there. And they're just showing us this map in which they have overlaid the linear infrastructure, which is your railway line, your electric line, etc., with the water courses. And the reason I'm showing you this is because when we look at land, we just look at what we can see. So you either see, you just see one thing. You see the tree or you see the building. We don't think of the layers that are there. So hydrology is an important layer too. And before I end, I must go back to the slide by life, which showed us all the diversion in the tiger habitats, So just to say, Pilibhit, the second one, is in Uttar Pradesh, in the Terai area where you had close to where we saw the leopard and the elephants. So this is moist forest, which is always humid all the time. Then the longest one, which is Dampa, is your moist evergreen tropical forest of the northeast, which similar to where you will find Amur falcons, for example, which is very, very iconic and only found in that part of India. And finally, Corbett, which maybe some of you have gone to. Corbett is Western Himalayan forest. So Corbett has grassland forest and rivers, which is a very unique landscape in itself because it has these thick forests growing on mountains. It also has rivers. It has a gradient in which you have the river interacting with the forest, interacting with grasslands. And it's a very rich place for not just tigers, but all other kinds of animals. They even have gharials over there. So I'm just trying to show you that if you look at the land around us, there are many things that are happening. One is the things that we build, and the other are things that we can't see so easily. So we can't see so easily the ecosystems, or the hydrology, or the species, the wild animals. And the only thing that I wanted to say through my talk is that wildlife conservation is possible, but we shouldn't look at wildlife and politics as two different things, because political decisions about land are the number one reason why wildlife conservation happens or doesn't happen. And the second thing is that I just want you to consider the land around you, even if it's just a tree. I showed you the examples of the tree. I want you to look at land around you through these layers, to understand everything that's happening, the livelihood issue, the political pressure groups, the needs of the animal or the ecosystem, all need to be considered while we're looking at the land. And that is the only way we can have any good planning for our country. Thank you.
Hi. First of all, a beautiful session. Really loved it a lot. I just had one query. When you're dealing with people who, hunting is one of the things, it's like a kind of a norm. So, what is the way in which you kind of tell them or you train, especially if there are kids that you're dealing with? You said that you started dancing with them. So, other than that, what are the things that you go around the community and tell them that it's not quite okay to, kill these wildlife? So, what's the thing?
I'm very uncomfortable with telling people what to do, so I never told them what to do. I think the way that I approach this is I give them the information, and I hope that they will decide something that's aligned with wildlife conservation. So I believe in participation. If somebody comes to me and asks me to stop doing something, I'm probably not going to just stop. It's not going to happen. So what I did is I thought of, ways in which I could tell the Amur falcon story in a way that would appeal to them. So, the maps of them coming from Russia, etc., was something that appealed to them. And of course, also telling them that it's not legal to hunt. They do know it's not legal to hunt. It's not like they don't know. But I think creating a value for the bird as something that's alive was like really important. And the eco clubs are a way to bring the next generation in, because we also find that young people have a completely different outlook. They're not necessarily entrenched in their in their ways, and I'm not trying to brainwash anybody. The point is that I want them to view nature through a lens of curiosity. So every child has a catapult over there. The idea is to take that energy and put it in a camera or to put it in a painting. And when I made the curriculum of the eco clubs, it has a lot of that, the paintings and the visual, the way of kind of considering an animal without killing it, because they all know how to kill it, but that's not what I'm really looking for. And the eco clubs are just a very small aspect. Of course, there's a lot of like the government, talking to the government, working with the forest staff, and of course doing my own ecological surveys of monitoring the bird. The ecological surveys that I do of monitoring the bird do not necessarily interest the community, because, to the community is more of my education and advocacy. So I think any conservation plan has to have many heads. It can't just be ecology. It can't just be politics. It can't just be, songs. It has to have everything, because what we're actually trying to do is social change. And as you know, if you are a student of political science or any other subject that's related, anything that happens in society requires that multi-headed approach. Yeah. So I've never told them what to do. I gave them the information, and they decided. They did a village council resolution to stop hunting.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you, Rohit, for your question. Ma'am, I liked how you said that you do not brainwash the communities. You tell them what to do, and they choose the path that is best for them.
Yeah.
Ma'am, our next question is by Sana Khan, and she asks, there has been a continuous delusion of environmental laws in the country. What can one do on an individual or community level to prevent this?
It's a very good question. I wanted to speak about the EIA, but there wasn't enough time in a 1-hour session. So, last year, the government attempted to change the environment impact assessment notification, which was basically a dilution, because it gave, powers of kind of doing projects in various parts of India without having environmental safeguards. So, cutting a forest becomes more easy, making a dam that destroys a forest becomes more easy, etc. So we had this amazing youth movement in which a lot of people came together to kind of send their comments to the ministry, to kind of send, participate in saying that we don't want this law, because we do want trees to stand where they are. We don't want everything to get destroyed by totally commercial interests. And as I was telling you in my presentation, it's the commercial interest of the land that really becomes an issue in a country like ours. All the diversions that are done of the tiger reserves, etc., are done because of this commercial interest. So uh, the good thing to do is to follow people, environmentalists who are talking about, the change in laws. So, like, I'm on Twitter. You're welcome to follow me, and we do try to get public involvement, because at the end of the day, the environment is not mine. It's not just my business. And one of the reasons why the environment impact assessment notification did not happen in the way that they wanted it is because of the participation of a lot of people, many of whom are extremely young. So literally there were thousands of letters sent to the environment ministry saying, we can't have this law. Okay, so what happens is, when you have a new act or a new law, usually there's a period of commenting that is given to the public, in which the public is invited to give comments and to to say whether it's a good law or a bad law. So that is when we ask the public to get involved, because the public should be involved in what kind of laws are being made. So be in touch with environmentalists, and be a part of the consultation process. It works. That's how you can be involved.
Thank you, Sansana, and thank you, ma'am. One of the important things which you said is that the youth should be involved into the laws of the country, because we are the future, and the environment doesn't belong to one person or one government. It belongs to all, and it is the responsibility of everyone. Ma'am, there are two questions by Datik Patel. The first is, what is the future of conservation? Meaning, other than just our will to save the extinction of endangered species, why do we need to do it? How useful can it be for human prosperity? This question is in no way meant to show that we should be just human-centric species.
So when we were born, we needed to cry in order to activate our lungs. When a baby is born, it needs air to activate its lungs. If it doesn't cry, it's going to be damaged. Everything that we do is connected to nature, and we actually consider ourselves to be people, but we are people, but we're also animals. So the food that we eat comes from the soil, and the water that we drink comes from usually a river or a reservoir very far away from where you are. So there is no way that we can live, away from healthy and clean nature, because at the moment that water that you drink is polluted, you have to have many other kinds of different interventions to make that water okay, and to be able to mitigate the impacts of, say, river pollution. The first thing is, we can't live without a healthy nature. The second thing is that there are a lot of nature-based services that we cannot hope to replicate. This would be pollination. It would be, a filtration of air through trees and through mangroves. It would be the storm buffers that are provided by certain forests in certain parts of India. So we can't do this. So, for example, if I were to try to save Odisha from cyclones, what I need to do is plant mangroves, which are going to keep the soil and be a buffer against the tropical cyclones. And we are actually in an era of climate change where, everything is changing, and we have a lot of extreme events. So we just had 2 cyclones. Number of cyclones in the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal have gone up exponentially because India is so hot. So it's kind of attracting these cyclones from from the water. And we are experiencing, rainfall that's more, erratic. You can't really predict. So there's no way that we can go ahead without what we call a nature-based solution. So you need more wetlands to soak the water that comes when you have more rainfall. We need drainage patterns, natural drainage patterns, in order to avoid floods. So, I showed you a map of the hydrology of Molim. So what happens when you build on a stream or a river? What happens is that you get floods. The Chennai floods of 2015 also was partly due to the construction on a canal. And so we're not away divorced from nature, and we also need more and more nature-based solutions as there's more and more climate change and more extreme events that are happening. So the question of conservation is not just to save animals. It's literally to save us, and it's literally to make the earth a bit more habitable. It is so hot now. It has always been hot in India, but it's so much more hot than summer days have increased all over. If you go outside, which obviously you must be doing every day, if you don't have a tree, on the road, it's unbearable. And having a tree there reduces the temperature of the tarmac by 15 degrees. That's the impact a tree has. So what are we going to do? Are we going to make a sunshade all over India to protect ourselves when we go out? It's not possible. The scale at which we need solutions can only be provided by nature. So when we are talking about water filtration, when we're talking about water drainage, when we're talking about microclimate cooling, such as, like the way trees do, it's only natural things that can provide that solution. And we need to have more nature-based solutions going forward.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, the second question by Gatik is, how often does the research in this field reach to the political policy making process, and how serious policy makers have been about conservation? As in, how much fund is given to such researchers?
There's a general disregard currently for wildlife conservation, for environmental conservation. I think this is a disregard also for anything that's not very commercial. So a lot of public interest has been taken over by larger interests which are more commercial. So it's not just for environment. I think it is also, when you have public spaces that are getting taken over, like the Central Vista is an example in which, you have this nice place where everybody can gather in India Gate. It's a bit like Gateway of India. So if somebody, takes Gateway of India and makes a building over there where you can't go in, it's a loss to the public as well. So I think there's a general disregard right now, on what public interest really is. And I showed you the public trust doctrine also. There is very little regard for environment, but we definitely try to take our findings to the government. We work closely with the government. I work closely with the government in many states of India. Having said that, it's a long way to go. I think we generally are a very short-sighted kind of people. So we generally are just doing the short-term gain kind of thing. So it's okay to cut the forest or, mine everywhere or dynamite the mountain to make roads. Finally, research money, it's very limited. It's really limited. It's as limited as money for public health or money for other sectors which are trying to do serious work. It's always a struggle.
Ma'am, I have a question, and my question is, ma'am, the food habits of Northeast India and the Hindi heartland are very different. Example, the Amur falcon was hunted and some other animals and birds are killed to be eaten. So how do we bridge this gap and tensions from a wildlife perspective?
First of all, I don't judge them for eating falcons or eating dogs. What happens is we tend to have a very approach of disgust to anybody who eats something different from us. So there are people who are vegetarian, there are people who are non-vegetarian. People who are vegetarian often, react with disgust to people who eat non-veg. And within non-veg, there are different kinds of meat. So even a non-vegetarian person would say, how can you eat a dog or how can you eat a snake? Which is something people in northeastern states do eat. So, the way that I look at it is, and I study animals. Animals eat meat. I cannot, say that a leopard should turn vegetarian. What I'm trying to say is, I'm not trying to compare a person to a leopard. What I'm trying to say is that I look at it as just the way that it is. It is the way it is, and it needs acceptance for that. So I do not, share the views of many people who think that people from the Northeast are disgusting, or if somebody is eating something different from me, it's disgusting. So if you go to Southeast Asia, people eat squids and octopus, which we don't eat in India. Our coastal habits are not the same as the coastal habits of other states. So Maharashtra is a coastal state. You don't really eat octopus in restaurants in the way that you have octopus in restaurants in, say, Singapore or Indonesia or Thailand, because those countries have much more dependence on the sea. Singapore is completely dependent on the sea for its food, for example, so they have octopus. I'm trying to say that first of all, it's important to not look at it. Something different from us should not be looked at as disgusting and worthless. The second thing is that it is illegal to hunt wild animals and eat them. So the way that I understand the Amur falcon issue is that it is illegal, and it was damaging for the species, because there were 10,000 falcons being hunted in one day, in one place. So the place that I showed you, the young reservoir, had 10,000 falcons hunted every day for at least 10 days. So more than 100,000 falcons were hunted in just 10 days. So if this continues, the species will go extinct. And it has happened many times that common species go extinct. There's a bird called the passenger pigeon in the US, and it became extinct in the US. And the dodo was, a bird in many numbers. It went extinct. Vultures were extremely populous in India. They're almost extinct now. So, my concern is that it's not legal, but it's also, the scale at which it's being done, it cannot be sustainable. That's it. So that was my concern. More than me feeling like, oh my God, how can you eat this? It was more like, this particular species is going to go extinct if you are going to hunt it at this scale. So we need to stop this hunting. And then also, the difference between a wild animal and a domestic animal is a very fundamental difference. Okay, this is important for everybody who eats meat. So domestic animals, by their very nature, are domesticated by us, and we are controlling their breeding. Okay, so whatever animal we're eating, the chicken, the goat, the fish, if you consider fish to be meat, from a sociological perspective, we are controlling the breeding, the means of production, and the animal is breeding, we are breeding it. That's totally different from hunting a wild animal whose breeding and reproduction we don't control. So there is a fundamental difference over here, and therefore it is much more easy for a wild animal to go extinct, because we are not ensuring that the population can regenerate itself. We're just taking from it, and we're not kind of giving back. And I would say the only kind of meat that we should eat is actually domesticated meat, because we again are controlling the means of production. And a chicken is never going to go extinct. A falcon will go extinct. And there are local extinctions of falcons in my lifetime and in yours as well. So when your parents were growing up, they would have seen a lot more falcons in Mumbai, in Delhi, in the places that they've grown up in, which are not there anymore. So wildlife is actually facing a crisis, and the scientists call it the 6th mass extinction, in which animals are going extinct at mass levels. Local populations of animals have hugely dropped. So even when it rains, the kind of insects that come inside your house have changed in the last 10 years. When your parents were growing up, there were way more insects that came inside the house when it rained. Now it doesn't. So the mass extinction is going on, and therefore our ethical response to wild animals has to be fundamentally different to our ethical response to domestic animals. So I think people should eat meat, but it should be domestic animals only if they want to eat meat. So this is something that I explained to them, that I told them that it's not sustainable. It's going to lead to extinction.
Ma'am, the next question is by Samiksha, and she asks, can you please tell some of the wildlife reserves in Northeast India that one should visit?
You should definitely visit Kaziranga, which is in Assam. Kaziranga has the Great Indian Rhino, the one-horn rhino, and the Indian rhino has one horn. There are African rhinos that have two horns, but the Indian rhino is also an amazing animal, and Kaziranga is a stronghold. Definitely go to Kaziranga. Definitely go to the some of them were on the map that I showed you. Dampa Tiger Reserve in Arunachal. It's very, very far and remote. But any wildlife sanctuary in Arunachal Pradesh is worth visiting because it's such a gorgeous landscape. It's so lush, it's so different. It's a bit remote, so it's a hike and an adventure, but I highly recommend it. Then there are also these community reserves in Manipur and Mizoram in which people have protected the area locally, which also are worth visiting. Start with Kaziranga, I would say. And you can also go to the Amur Falcon village. I'm happy to put people in touch. We've worked on homestays and people are, people can stay in the houses. That's where I stay when I go there. And the villagers will take care of you. So you can do Kaziranga and the Amur Falcon village, Pangti village in Northeast.
Ma'am, the next question is by Kisha Singh, and she asks, is there a specific reason for the male elephants not being a part of the herd?
It's just the sociology of the animal. So we often think that human beings are the only animals with sociology, but animals, other species have sociologies as well. You understand what is sociology? It's the interaction of the species, amongst itself. So the female elephants raise the young ones, and they only interact with the males during the breeding season. And the breeding season doesn't always come because the gestation of the Indian elephant is extremely long. So the Indian elephant is pregnant for 19 to 22 months. It's a very long pregnancy. And when she is an adult elephant, a female is usually either pregnant or lactating, meaning she's either pregnant, gestating her baby inside her, or she is feeding and rearing her young baby. So the Ganga elephant, the one that I showed you, had a young calf, and the calf stays with the mother for a few years. So all this time, they don't want the males around them because they are totally devoted to bringing up the young one. And they just stay together as this usually related herd. Sometimes, so the male elephant that you find in Indian forest is usually alone. Sometimes you may have two males coming together just in order to maybe opportunistically find food together. But the big herds are only females, young ones, and very small calves. I mean, what is the reason for it? I mean, nobody knows, only the elephant knows what the reason is, but this is the way the society is grouped in elephant biology, in elephants in India. And different animals have different kind of sociologies. The tiger, for example, is a solitary animal. The tigress will bring up her cub alone, and she will not interact with the male tiger. She brings up, and you compare that to the lion, in which the lion forms a group, a pride, in which you have lionesses and the young one and the lion. That male lion is there to protect the lioness. Even though the lioness does most of the hunting, the male lion is there to basically ward off other males. So different species have different, sociologies and different ways of bringing up their young.
Ma'am, we have a question by Atiya, and she asks, what what path should be taken academically to work in the field of nature conservation?
You can study a master's in wildlife conservation or conservation biology. There are institutes in India that offer masters. So you have the Wildlife Institute of India in Dehradun, then you have the NCBS in Bangalore. Look it up. If you just do wildlife and masters in wildlife science, Google it, you'll find it. There are also many other universities, the universities in Pune and also other parts of Maharashtra that offer a master's in wildlife science. And a master's in wildlife science would have typically a combination of ecology, statistics, animal behavior, and a bit of governance and geography in it. I've also studied conservation biology, and I found it very useful. You can also become a conservationist by coming at it through different fields. So you could study law and specialize in environmental law. You could study design and communications, and come to conservation through a communications and design perspective. You could also study zoology or botany, and come to conservation. And finally, you can also study GIS, which is a very, very important field for wildlife, because, I've shown you maps today. They've all been made by my colleagues who, specialize in cartography and GIS. And in order to understand land, as we were speaking about today, maps are very important. So, you don't have to only study wildlife conservation. You could also study these other allied subjects. And if you don't become a wildlife conservationist professionally, well, the subject and the topic requires people. In any case, you could still contribute to wildlife conservation in different ways. Follow environmentalists, follow them on social media, wherever else, and see how you can be involved. Sometimes you could volunteer your time, your effort, your energy, your expertise, which maybe is of a different field. Read books, update yourself on what's happening, in environment. It's nice to know what's going on, right? It's nice to know what's going on in our country. It's nice to be informed citizens. A lot of what I spoke about today is also in my book, Wild and Wilful. So you're welcome to read that. It's available on Amazon. It's a Harper Collins publication. But I also did want to show you another book, which I recommend. This is called Leopard Diaries. It's by Sanjay Gubbi, and it's about the leopards in India. And it's got his field work, and it's got his, all his experiences over the years, and I really love it. And this, of course, is Wild and Wilful, which is my book, and it has 15 Indian species in it, and all the politics and all the ecology around how we can conserve these species. There are lots of nature writing today, so I really do recommend reading more and associate yourself with NGOs or individuals and find out how you can be involved. You don't have to be a wildlife conservationist to do wildlife conservation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. On behalf of the entire PBPSA and the Nature Club, I thank you and thank the participants for joining in and asking questions. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you for having me.